There we go. And I am just going to introduce Mark very briefly, and then I'm going to hand it over. So I'm thrilled to see familiar faces. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your days to join us for this event. I know where everybody's coming from, but we always love to see the diversity of people popping in from all over the world, different generations, different approaches for education. Welcome to the Hope Braintrust. It's a collaborative space online and in person. Yes, sometimes we do in-person events designed for and by this growing community. My mission is to mobilize authentic connections between all stakeholders in education: the students, the teachers, the parents, the builders, the academics, and everyone in between. This is a space where you'll meet courageous and willing people you may never otherwise have met. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Hope Paterson, a mother of two, a transformation coach, and global education innovation specialist. I'm on a mission to shine a spotlight on people working to support and innovate education and an entrepreneurial mindset for our future generations. We network, we collaborate, we share, we learn and grow in this Hope Braintrust. And today, I'm so excited to introduce Mark Hanf. He's a true Renaissance individual, a polymath whose life is a fusion of math, art, and teaching. Welcome, Mark Hanf, the visionary at the nexus of knowledge and creativity. Over to you.
Thank you, Hope. I'm really grateful to be here with everybody today. This is going to be fun. I like to start all of my classes and workshops and days with a little centering activity. So if you wouldn't mind joining me, I just would love to take 3 deep breaths to allow us to be present together today. So really simple. We're going to take 1 into our belly, 1 into our heart, and 1 into our head. And so if we could all just sit up a little straighter, I invite you, if you want to close your eyes, you can, or you can leave them open. It's up to you. Breathe out together. And then take a deep breath into your belly. Hold it. And you can let it go. Take a deep breath into your chest. Hold it. And let it go. And last one, take 1 into your head. Hold it. And you can let it go. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. We are here today to explore how we can reimagine math. And this is a topic that really is near and dear to my heart. And before we jump in about my experience and who I am and all that kind of stuff, I'd actually love to dive into a little bit of imagination. So, as you probably know, Einstein said famously that imagination was more powerful than knowledge. And I love that in a lot of ways. You know, when you think about imagination, you think maybe about like intellectual creativity. But when you break the word down, it really relates to images. It relates to pictures. It relates to maps. It relates to being able to visualize, to envision, to dream into something. And that's is something powerful. There's a magic to it. And it's interesting how magic and imagination have the same root. So we're going to do a little imagination, and we're going to do a little time travel together. So we're all going to actually go back in time to our middle school math class. So picture in your mind, go back to like 7th, 8th grade, and envision what it was like to be in your middle school math class. All right, really be there. Like, maybe close your eyes. I already see some thumbs down. Everybody's going to have different experiences related to this. All right, there's a full spectrum for sure. On one hand, you might actually absolutely love this math class, or this might bring up some anxiety for you, and that's real. So, and we're going to get into that in a minute, but just take a moment to really put yourself there. Maybe close your eyes. Maybe, what did it feel like to sit in that desk? Or maybe you homeschooled, I'm not sure, but go back to your middle school math experience. And what did it feel like? Right? What was your emotional experience in that class? What do you remember? Not just from the feeling of that class, but what do you remember in terms of the content? Like, what sticks out to you of your experience then? And our first activity is we're going to do a little dyad breakout group where you're going to be in groups of 2, and each person will get a chance to share their experience. From each person will have 2 minutes to do this. Okay. So when we break out into groups, well, and it looks like we have a couple of new people that have just joined. So before we break out, let me explain one more time what we're going to do. We're going back to our experience of middle school math class. And we're going to take 2 minutes in a dyad breakout group for each one of us to share our memories and our experience of that. And it could be somewhere on the spectrum between like, we absolutely thoroughly enjoyed that experience, or that could have even been traumatic for us, or somewhere in between. So we're going to break out into groups, each person take 2 minutes, and whoever has, we'll say, the longest hair is going to go first. Okay. So watch the time, take 2 minutes, and then we'll all come back together and we'll share. Any questions before we get started?
I'm going to pop you in a room with 2 people. You can just
Okay.
be present. Okay. See you soon.
That's great.
Great. So middle school math. You want to go first? Well, your hair is a little longer, so you'll go first.
Well, Hope's hair is definitely longer.
Oh, okay. Fair point.
I'm not going. I'm going to be here as an observer. That's all. I chose this room on purpose, just to hear you guys.
Well, I remember the teacher that I had was Mr. Nancaro, and I was at Clara Barton Junior High in Royal Oak, Michigan. And I loved that math class. And I loved Mr. Nancaro. I thought he was such a beautiful older guy, and he had kind of a wonderful sense of humor. He often promised ice cream cones, but I don't think he ever delivered them. But he would talk about ice cream cones. And I remember him asking me to come sit next to him, probably because I was not paying attention. and he wanted my full attention, so he brought me up next to him. But what I remember about him was he would break out in some kind of like hemophilia or something, and I never quite understood what was going on. But what I really did understand was that he loved what he was doing, and he made what he was doing fun. And he created an atmosphere in the class that was one of curiosity and open-endedness. And so I go back to that moment in Clara Barton Junior High School in Royal Oak, Michigan, and I realized that I was blessed to have Mr. Nancaro as a teacher, and I loved math at that moment. Stephen.
Cool. Well, that's a very fortunate experience. I had a bit of a bipolar experience with math at Jonas Salk Junior High School. The first teacher was a Mr. Howe, who was a quintessential Yankee. He actually, his first day of class, put on the blackboard P-A-H-K, the C-A-H, and he said, that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, Park the car in Harvard Yard. So he introduced himself as the quintessential Yankee on day one. He had a sense of humor. He looked like he was about 100. He was skinny and wore suspenders. His suspenders brought his pants up to his armpits, but you had to love him. And he started the class by saying, "You don't bother me, and I won't bother you." And then, but he was like your teacher. He was joyful about it, and so you caught it. The next year we had geometry with a Mrs. McGuire, and I have to tell you, I felt every new theorem she put up on the blackboard was a tremendous imposition. I didn't understand, wasn't it enough that we had theorem 3-10? Do I really need a theorem 3-11? And I zoned out as rarely before in life.
You guys are so entertaining. Do you know what? I actually have anxiety right now because you guys are a little bit older than me, and I don't remember who my teacher was in grade 8. I have no memory whatsoever. I know all my teachers, but I've somehow blocked out middle school math completely. I have no recollection of those classes. I remember elementary, I remember high school, but not middle school. How weird is that?
I
Be a
find
good reason.
with many of our students, they have math wounds that begin in middle school. In other words, if I made a student in 11th or 12th grade who's math phobic, they generally dated back to 6th through 8th grade. They had some horrible class, and all the red marks on their papers, and the parents making a thing out of it, and it gets worse and worse.
I think
That's your experience?
I think so. I didn't really think about it that well, but yeah, I think so. I'm going to stick with both of you. I'm going to stick with both of you. Thank you.
Everybody's coming back now.
Sorry, Kath, I killed that breakout mid-sentence. I hate breakout rooms.
Everyone came back with kind of a grin on their face.
It's interesting. All right, we'll wait till everybody comes back here. There we go. So I'll just share briefly. This is actually my first opportunity to host an online workshop play shop. I usually do mine in person and hands-on. So I'm learning along with everybody in terms of breakout rooms and all the things. Looks like somebody else coming back in. There we go. So just quick show of hands. Raise your hand if math was something that you just absolutely loved. Like it could have even been your favorite subject in school. Okay. Couple hands. Okay, great. Awesome. Raise your hand if you had some anxiety related to math. It could have even been, trauma related to math. This could be something that is, something that could even still be with you today in certain ways, or the way that you view yourself in terms of being like, oh, I'm someone that's good at math, or I'm not someone that's good at math. It's really fascinating whenever I do workshops, and I do workshops and teacher trainings with all ages, kids through adults around the country. And I always start with this question of, raise your hand if you have math trauma. And over half the hands go up, every group I've ever been in. And so I really want to explore why that is and how we can change that for people, for ourselves and for our students, and it's possible to do it. I've seen it firsthand many, 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 many times, and that's exciting to me. So I'd love to share just a little bit about my journey with math. I'm the kid who loved math. I was a total math nerd, and I'll own that. As you can possibly see, I'm still in that world a little bit. I always saw math like puzzles, and I loved solving puzzles of all kinds. And so whether it was a Rubik's Cube or a word problem or whatever it is, that's kind of how I viewed it. And I was just gifted in this lifetime with a certain wiring that allowed me to have a facility with math. And so coming up through school, I was the kid that was in math club after school and on the math team, and our math team won the state championship. And we went to, I went to governor's school for mathematics, and studied, probably the highest levels that you can. And at the same time, my experience in math class was really challenging. It was at times for me, even though I enjoyed math, the class was really boring at times. It was it became more and more abstract. It became more and more irrelevant to anything else in my life. It just became something that existed in like the conceptual, mathematical, theoretical world that, again, on one hand was interesting in terms of like problem solving, but I wanted something that was more tangible, that was more relevant, that I could apply to something. And so as I, moved on in my career, I taught math. I taught math in the classroom, STEAM subjects in general, and we'll come back to that. But I was a math teacher for many years in the classroom, mostly middle school, but also high school. And then I also applied it to things like designing and building a house, or designing educational toys or things like that. So definitely I found ways to use it. But in the classroom setting, I wanted to share my love of math. Like, I'm really passionate about math. And it was challenging to do that because a lot of students that would come into my class had already put themselves in this category of, I'm not good at math, I don't like math, I don't understand math. And they were just kind of tuned out. And so it was my challenge to engage them. And so the work that I've been doing recently is I stepped back from teaching in the classroom. I still teach workshops around the country, but the work that I'm doing professionally right now is related to educational design. And so I'm designing toys and multimedia and games and all sorts of things. Love that the puppy's coming to say hi. I'm designing all of these things that allow math to be more engaging and fun and relevant, and make those connections so that students can actually share that love of math. So that's what I'd love to share with y'all today. And so the first thing I'd like to share with you is a short video. This is kind of an overview of the company that I've recently started in the last couple of years. It is called Education Integrity. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. Quick thumbs up. Can everybody see my shared screen?
It's
okay,
great. And then once you press play, it'll go into the broadcast.
Yeah. So I'm going to play this. It's a few minutes long. I think it's maybe 6 minutes long. And then we can share questions, comments, and connections afterwards. But this will kind of speak for itself. Welcome to Education Integrity, where we take a holistic approach to the journey of lifelong learning. By exploring the synergy of the arts and sciences, we cultivate an understanding of ancient wisdom and apply it to the modern day experience. Through the use of animated multimedia and game-based hands-on activities, we integrate a wide variety of learning styles in order to make education relevant, engaging, and fun. Education is often defined as the systematic process of study, yet it can also be understood as guidance that allows one to be prepared for the adventure of life. The definition of integrity implies strength, whether of character, such as honor and honesty, or structural stability that comes from integrating all parts into a unified, undivided whole. Education integrity combines these ideas to offer an array of powerful tools that help students navigate along their path. The landscape of this educational journey incorporates a variety of different subjects. One critical component of every student's educational path is mathematics. To some, math is a magical key. To others, it is a dreaded monster blocking the way. Our integrated approach is inviting and enriching for both the strong and challenged student. How do we do this? First, this is done by illustrating the connection between math and other subjects like music, biology, and astronomy, just to name a few. The synergy of art and science marries the imagination and intellect of the right and left brain. In the modern holistic educational model, we refer to this as STEAM. This interdisciplinary approach offers many doorways to make math more accessible and intriguing. It also offers threads of connection that can be woven into a tapestry of understanding. Next, we recognize that every student has a unique genius with gifts and challenges and learns in different ways. In our experience as teachers, we understand the importance of using a well-rounded approach. We have distilled this diversity of intelligences into a simple framework of 5 elemental learning styles. This integration into all of our activities in multimedia facilitates maximum engagement and a comprehensive understanding. Math in the middle grades becomes increasingly abstract, and when taught through only one style, such as the mental, it can become narrow and exclusive. Our multifaceted model expands the opportunities for learning. For students who are challenged linguistically, these elemental learning styles help to unlock hidden potential, increase their success, and build self-confidence. For students who currently excel in mathematics and seek enrichment, this approach offers a broader perspective and many pathways to explore. Ultimately, math is a universal language. Since antiquity, humans have recognized geometric patterns in the natural world. Geometry literally means earth measurement and beautifully illustrates connections between vastly different scales of creation. In our search for understanding these relationships, 5 archetypal shapes revealed themselves. Today, known as the Platonic solids, these elemental forms are part of the blueprint that comprise the chemical and physical universe. Leonardo da Vinci's insatiable quest for truth led him to investigate and illustrate these specific geometries in a book called The Divine Proportion. This book explores the golden ratio that exists throughout art, math, and nature. Galileo, father of modern astronomy, said, "Mathematics is the language with which God has written the universe." Becoming fluent in this language allows one to read the book of nature on their journey and experience a profound connection to its wonder along the way. Math literacy is an essential component of every student's success, and geometry is at the heart of all of our courses. Yet, education integrity is much, much more than math. The synthesis of all the STEAM subjects, combined with the elemental learning styles, creates a unique educational integration that will supplement and enrich any curriculum. We're grateful for the opportunity to share this with you and invite you to cross the threshold and begin the next part of your adventure. So I'd love it if we could take just a couple of minutes and do some reflections. We're going to have quite a bit of time at the end of our time together today to do like a live Q&A. But with this many people, it's really nice for everybody to have a chance to think through their questions and reflect on them. So what we're going to do at this point is just take a couple of minutes. And if you wouldn't mind logging into the chat aspect of Zoom, it should be down in the toolbar if you're not familiar with that. But if you log into the chat area, please just take a couple of minutes and write any questions or any comments or any reflections that you have. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually mine those for the end and go back and be able to do some live Q&A. So does that make sense to everybody? So we'll just take a couple of minutes to do that and just see what comes up for you in terms of questions, comments, and connections.
And Mark, I don't know if you had that music for just 2 minutes of people writing. You had some music. Did you have that or no?
Yeah, let me see if I can just pull that up really quickly.
And feel free, guys, just to pop it in the chat and I'll grab it and hold it for later. Love to hear what came up for you in watching that. I know lots came up for me.
Yeah, I should have had
That's
that
okay.
musical file just queued up. I apologize for that.
I'm going to have to be fast on the chat, mining it.
Yeah. Yeah, these are great.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people working in education here who are working with lots of different learners, which is so cool.
I was just curious, and for some reason I can't see all of the faces at once for some reason.
You there. Share if you stop sharing the screen.
I just got it.
Cool.
Just quick show of hands. Are there any math educators in this group? Okay, great. Okay. And so I'm going to when I'm screen sharing right now, the meeting chat for me is on this same screen. Can you see that, or are you just seeing the graphic?
Just the graphic.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So one of the questions that came up immediately was, how do these particular geometries relate to the elements? That's a whole course in and of itself. That could be a really deep dive. The short version of that is, if you studied with Plato back in the ancient world, he was the first person to write about these geometries. He didn't invent them by any means, nor discover them, but he was the first person to write about them. So they're named after him, the Platonic solids, if that's something that you'd like to look up. But each one is related to one of the ancient elements. And this is a great segue, because in terms of the elements and the learning styles, one of the things that I learned early on in my educational career was, I might have to exit out of the chat and then come back in to show this again. Just one second.
Oh, Zoom, how we get used to multitasking.
Right.
Some people are like moving back and forth between chat and sharing and unsharing. And it's like a muscle, I think many of us have built.
Let me try this again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you see my keynote at this point?
Nope, we can see a guy with dreadlocks holding his hands up.
Well, I'll give a quick shout out to him as I'm changing this. His name is Roy Wooten. He is a 5-time Grammy Award-winning musician that plays with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. He and his brothers are all virtuoso musicians, and he actually wrote the music that I'm going to be sharing later in this presentation. He's really, a perfect example of a STEAM wizard, if you will, that has integrated not only the musical arts, but science and technology and engineering in so many ways. I'm going to try one more time to share the screen. Here we go. Okay, can you see that now?
Yep.
Great. So the elemental learning styles, we all learn in different ways. And it's really interesting when you look at mathematics and how we actually learn math. You might be familiar with the theory of multiple intelligences that Howard Gardner developed years ago. And when I first learned about that as a teacher, I mean, that was a game changer for me and how I taught. Because if you're not familiar with this, there are so many different ways that people learn. There are, logical, mathematical, visual, spatial, physical, kinesthetic. Some people are musical learners. Some people learn well in groups. They're interpersonal learners. Some are more self-reflective and are intrapersonal. Some connect with nature or the more metaphysical side of things. Some are linguistic learners. And so it's really interesting when you look at mathematics and how it's taught. It's mostly taught through a combination of the logical, mathematical, obviously, but also linguistic intelligences. And so in our particular model, that becomes the element of air, right? The mental, intellectual, mathematical, linguistic element. And so think about this for a second. Go back again to your middle school math class. There was probably equations on the board. There was a textbook. If you didn't learn the equation in class or take it in your written notes, you could read about it. There was probably word problems. There was a written exam, right? In so many ways, the way that the content is presented is in a linguistic, intellectual, logical framework. And if that wasn't your primary learning style, it was going to be challenging for you. And it was fascinating as a teacher when I would have students come in and do that like first beginning of the year conference with their parent. And a lot of times their parent would say, my child hates math. They're not good at math. Last year was a real struggle. We're really concerned. And I would always say, well, we'll see, because I do math in a slightly different way. And so when I would start to bring in hands-on ways to learn, right, or team-based ways to learn, right, or ways that connected with nature, or ways that connected with music and art, kids would just light up, because it possibly could have been the first time that they ever had a chance of communicating and understanding that content, right? It's like if I would have been teaching in French the whole time and they didn't speak French, the moment that I switched to their native language, all of a sudden it makes sense to them, right? And not only did it just like make sense to them, it was fascinating to me to see how often cases the kids that were bad at math, right, and struggled at math previously, when they were given an assignment that was hands-on, where they could actually physically construct and measure something, they were actually advanced in math, but they just never had an opportunity to express that before or to explore it. And so that was huge for me to see that. And it changed the course of my career, not only in the way that I taught, but also what I've started to design. And I'd really love to share that. So obviously, you can see around me that one of the things that I do is I design educational toys and games. But also I design curriculum. I'm a curriculum writer. And my background is in art. My actual degree in college, even though I studied like the highest levels of mathematics that you can, my degree is in art and art history. So combining that in that multiple intelligence and elemental learning style sort of way, that's something that I think is really powerful to identify and to share with kids. So I'd love to share with you just a short preview of something that is hot off the presses. Like we literally just finished this a couple of weeks ago. That is a new course that explores pi, right? We all learned about pi in school, right? And most people remember 3.14, and maybe it relates to circles in some ways, but this is a way to learn that in a well-rounded way, pun intended. So I'm going to share this next video. This one's because it's pi, it's 3 minutes and 14 seconds. And then we'll have an opportunity to discuss this. So switch this up. Welcome to the History and Mystery of Pi, where you will learn how this magical number relates to geometry and arithmetic, biology and physics, music and artistry, literacy and technology. What is pi? Many people know it simply as 3.14, yet that is only part of the story. The myth and math of pi is literally full of twists and turns, with plot lines and story arcs that are fascinating and inspiring. What is the origin of this number? Where can it be found around us and within us? How does this irrational ratio transcend math?
Mark, the audio's not
Yeah.
working. Audio's going in and out for some reason.
Huh.
Yeah. For some reason it's not. Is everybody else able to hear? Put your thumbs up if you can hear it. No, No, it's not. The audio for some reason is not coming through.
I'm gonna pause it
Yeah.
and then play it again and see what happens.
Sure, try it. It worked at the beginning. That was the thing.
Can you hear it now?
No,
No.
no. You know what? Yeah, it's not working. So what I think is we can move to breakout, and we can always send this video to people to watch after.
Well, that's interesting. And again, this is the first time that I've done a Zoom workshop, so there's obviously some technical difficulties. I'll go ahead and switch to this, and I'll just share a little bit about it. It would have been nice to have seen the rest of that, but I can switch to this. A lot
I
of
think
time,
you turned on the musicians on in your computer, we could hear the music.
you could hear the music.
Here, we could try one more time. Try one more time, and I think I might have fixed it. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh,
for
you did that, Hope, right? You put
Yeah.
musicians on. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
you are our tech support, Phil. Thank you. Let's try that again, Mark, from the top. Thanks for your patience.
Sure. No, it's all good. And while we're here, I'll just share about this because it's interesting. A lot of times, especially recently in the world of like online virtual education, there's so many amazing resources. And one of the things that I personally feel is missing with that as a teacher is the hands-on interactive component. And so with a lot of the online virtual learning that I've seen, it is very screen based. And even though part of what we're designing is, animated video based curriculum, which is a great tool, we also really wanted to include this hands-on approach. And so part of what we're designing is, how do you explore a topic like math in a way that is, let's say a physical game, right? A running sort of PE game. I'm somebody that also taught PE at the same time that I taught math. So I can really identify which are the kids that are physical kinesthetic learners, right? And needed to move. Sitting at a desk all day was challenging for them. They needed something hands-on to be able to make, right? So looking at this, it's like, how do you integrate compass drawing, and how do you integrate art activities, and how do you integrate math with musical learning styles? In this case, if you're a homeschooler or you have access to a kitchen at your school, there's actually an activity to make pizza pie, right? So again, what's a way that you could bring in these multiple learning styles into a math class that make it more concrete, that make it more tangible and relevant, and dare I say fun, right? Which is really important. And one of the things that I also learned as a teacher really early on was I needed to first and foremost get the kids' attention. If they weren't paying attention, it didn't matter what we were doing that day, they weren't learning, right? So if I could turn something into a game, it could be picking up trash, literally. If we split into teams and I made up some simple rules and turned it into a game, now everybody's excited about picking up trash on the playground, and everybody's into it, right? So how do you take this game-based multiple intelligence style and bring it to learning? That's a huge part of it, right there. I am going to go back to this last video and see if I can show you the last couple of minutes with sound, and we'll just see if it works. Okay. I'm going to fast forward. Can you hear the music?
No,
No.
that's so strange. But you know what? It is so great to watch on your own. I mean, if it doesn't work now, it's fantastic to hear you explain, and we can follow
Yeah,
up.
even if you can't see the, or even if you can't hear the words. This multimedia course offers an exploration of pi through 10 fun hands-on activities. Concepts are made easy to understand with visual illustrations and come alive with animation. Geometry literally means earth measurement, so connecting with nature and exploring the world around us is an integral part of this course. An interdisciplinary approach connects subject areas in the arts and sciences. Scientific literacy is built through a well-rounded understanding of vocabulary. This course integrates all of this through games and puzzles, video lessons with classroom teachers, printable activity pages, and much, much more. Visit. So again, I really wish that you could hear the audio, but you get a sense of what this looks like. And again, this is a radically different way than I learned math when I was in school. And it's something that I've tested with my students, middle school and high school level students, for the last years. This is a distillation of that I'm hoping to share with a wider audience. And
Oh, Mark, do you want us to I've got breakout rooms ready if you want me to pop them in soon.
yeah, so in this next breakout room, I'd really love for you to explore, take a couple minutes each. What are your learning styles? Right? How do you best learn? Right? So again, in terms of, you can think of that in terms of the multiple intelligences or the elemental learning styles, but what methods do you learn the best? Are you a group learner? Are you an individual learner? Are you a hands-on kinesthetic learner? Are you a musical learner or a visual learner? Are you someone who needs to listen and write as a linguistic learner? Does it help you to connect it to nature, right? Or even maybe to the metaphysical, right? So let's take a couple minutes each in our breakout room, and then we can each share what those learning styles are. So we can go ahead and we can break out now. Thanks, Hope.
See you in a minute.
Hello there.
Thing for you, Jordan. Hi, Paul. I wanted to ask you
I
if you
hope.
any thoughts on his video not playing. I've never had that before. Since you're
I think
No,
it
it
must have
came
been
on in the end. Did it came on for you guys at the end? It come on?
a little bit. We did
a
a
little
tech
bit.
check. Anyways, we can all watch it after.
Yeah, I think there's a setting you have to click.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. I'll let you guys introduce and meet each other.
Yes.
Hi, Jordan. I'm Paul.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
What's
you as
your
well.
learning style, Paul?
Oh gosh, so I used to run a travel company, as Hope knows, and we used learning styles when we worked with kids. This was back in 2010, I guess. It was kind of the high point of learning style. And then I started this education company, and I was like, oh, I'll go back to learning styles and we'll use that at Cicero. And I spent a day reading through all the controversy that came up in 2014, 2015 around learning styles and how they've been debunked. So I was like, oh God. I mean, Gardner's work hasn't been debunked. That's classic. But what's problematic about learning styles is putting kids into a bucket, putting them in a hole, right? And in truth, there's not a lot of data behind learning styles and using them in education settings. The current thinking is that we have many learning styles that we all use all the time, depending on context.
Yes.
And that really resonates with me, right? So I pretty much can learn through every single learning style, depending on the context. It's my feeling.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'm a fan and I understand learning styles, but what you just said makes total sense. I don't like being put in a bucket. So to lump kids into a certain learning style, or even ourselves, yeah, it could be problematic. You could be telling yourself you're this style, even though your evolution as a human has maybe pushed you into a different style, or maybe a different subject puts you in a different learning style, like you mentioned. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's interesting. I think learning style, like all things, is impermanent. It can change and evolve.
Yeah.
I think as
even day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, to add to that, I think, especially in my conversations with Mark, and I know Phil Moore also has experienced exploring learning styles in learning environments, is to just make sure that, say, for example, there's math being delivered in so many different ways, so that it enriches the young human's mind and is like kind of popping off light bulbs in all their different senses and all their different ways of learning. So that because math, I don't know about you guys, but math for me was always language based, kind of just one-dimensional. I never got to experience my learning style that I have many with math, or sort of more with science. That's why I like lab. I don't know if you guys like lab, but that for me, like, I was like, oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah, totally.
I think a really great teacher is somebody who can really seek out the right learning style at the right time, right? So they think they have to have a diversity of approaches and be ready to deploy them depending on the situation. And so it's about like meeting that learner, figuring out, oh, I have this concept that we need to, this learner needs to take on. How am I going to get that concept into that learner? Well, I'll try, path A. Oh, that doesn't seem, and then the teacher has to have exceptional EQ and be like, oh, that's actually not working. Let me try this. Let me try that. And just keep trying until suddenly that learner latches on and you say, okay, we have traction, which is a concept we use a lot in Cicero. I'm getting traction with that thing. Okay, then let's go full stop into that learning style or method of presenting.
Actually, if I could just quickly plug the idea that Paul, just so you know, Jordan, he does a lot of one-on-one. His company Cicero does one-on-one tutoring, which then the teachers can kind of adjust and be agile. And it's so cool, even for like 1 year, for your kid to have that experience, or for you to homeschool your child, as Paul and I have I know Jordan's exploring that. Like, you will know your kids' learning styles and how to switch them on in other ways. It's amazing, life-changing.
Yeah, totally with you, Paul. Yeah, right with you. And the way the school system is, the school system I went through, and I'm sure the same with you guys, and I don't blame the teachers, because there's 30 kids. How can they possibly, work on a one-to-one basis? It's a tragedy, but I understand how it is.
Yeah, structural problem.
We were just talking about how do we relate what we're learning in a math class to something tangible in the real world, because there's this question that comes up just over and over and over again, this archetypal question of, when are we ever going to use this? And so it's really interesting as a math teacher and as a parent now of a high school student who is learning math. And by the way that math is taught today versus the way that I learned it, decades ago, is very different. And so it's so important, in my opinion, to connect it to something real. And in so many cases, that does not happen. And unfortunately, when I was looking at my daughter's, freshman high school end of course exam this last year, it just felt like half of the exam, at least, was just completely abstract and irrelevant. And I really couldn't answer the question for her when she was actually going to use this. And so that's really challenging. And so as a math teacher, as a curriculum designer as well, I've really been sitting with, okay, looking at the concepts that we want to teach, how can these be connected to something in the real world? And there's so many opportunities to do this, right? First of all, about 20 years ago, a term called STEM started to be thrown around. You're probably familiar with that: science, technology, engineering, and math. So it's obvious how science and math dovetail. What's interesting is that a lot of times what you learn in your math class and what you learn in your science class are completely separated from each other at a given school. Unless you are at a school that has team teaching and interdisciplinary learning, those are completely siloed off, and those teachers aren't like coordinating the curriculum so that you see the natural connections that happen between them all the time. But I kind of want to go a step beyond just STEM. I remember when I first heard that term, I was like, well, wait a second, what about art? Like, art needs to be included in there. And if you add art to STEM, it's STEAM. And so, wow, let's start calling it STEAM education, right? And it's taken a while for that to pick up steam, but now that's a term that people are using, which I'm really happy about. Because when you really step back and you look at artists like, let's say, Leonardo da Vinci, who's just a perfect example of, we used the term like polymath earlier, someone who's learned in many subjects. The combination of science and the sciences and the arts coming together, that's where there's a really powerful synergy. And there's so many connections. Like, someone, even when they come to a math class and they think, oh, either I'm not good at math or I don't really like math, when they start to see the connections to art, when they start to see the connections to music, sometimes it's mind-blowing for people. And to give an example, I wish that we could have heard more of the music. It sounds like maybe you heard a little bit of it at the beginning of the video, but my friend Roy, who you saw a picture of earlier, he's actually created music that is based on the number pi. So the digits of pi are actually writing the song, and the fractal chord structure related to that is how he composes the music for pi. It's absolutely brilliant. But then when you look, he's a percussionist. So when you look at, how a beat is broken down, that's all math. When you look at how harmonics in music work, right? Pythagoras, we were talking about earlier, was the first person to look at the length of a string and the geometric ratio of, if you take a string and divide it in half, that's 1 octave, right? It's a 2-to-1 ratio. So there's so many connections between the arts and the sciences. It's unbelievable, but that doesn't always get expressed and explored in a traditional math class. So one of the things that I've really wanted to do in what I've been designing is to deeply explore that, right? So what are the sciences that connect with this? Well, math is a science, first of all, technically. And when we think about math, a lot of times, we think, reading, writing, arithmetic. Well, arithmetic is number. Arithmetic is counting, it's calculating, it's quantifying. That is one aspect of math for sure. But when you look at math in its holistic framework, there's this whole other branch that is geometry. And in the ancient world, you would learn both. You would learn arithmetic and geometry and music and astronomy, and that was called the quadrivium. Those four pillars were the pillars of ancient education. And so from a geometric perspective, you're not looking at number and quantity, you're looking at pattern, you're looking at connection, right? And that's a whole different framework. And they're connected for sure, they're interrelated. But specifically, if you look at the lens of geometry and that now you start to look at science, you start to see chemistry, you start to see molecular structure, right? And you're learning about that at the same time, and you're starting to make those connections. You're starting to see biology, right? The way that the human body or any plant or animal grows is geometric in nature, and there's ratios and proportions that are common throughout them, and you start to see these profound connections. Astronomy, architecture, physics, there's so many different sciences that connect to this, right? But again, this is also connecting to all of our subject areas, because raise your hand if you ever learned the history of mathematics. Okay, not very many people. It's a fascinating topic. Like when you look at somebody like Pythagoras, this is a fascinating story. This is a fascinating individual that you never learn about, but putting all these pieces together really makes it come alive. And it's a completely different way to learn. So I wish that the technical side of this was working a little better. We could try one more time.
You know what I'm gonna suggest, Mark, because we can send the videos to people after, and I think while we have you live, it would be so great to dive into some of these questions, because I'm sure we're gonna be able to use up all that time, if that's okay with you.
And I would even prefer to have the videos sent to me so I can rewatch them and share them with my colleagues.
Yeah, well, I'll be sending everything to everyone. And I wonder if I could read the questions out. Some people had to hop off for another meeting, but Mark, shall I read them out and then we can just dive in?
Yeah, and just really quickly before we do that, I just wanted to invite everybody on this call. I'd love to share the link with each one of you where you could have full access to this first course that we've created, the History and Mystery of Pi. You'll have a whole range of videos that you'll be able to interact with and explore, and all the principal activities. We're at a point where we'd love to just beta test this and get people's responses, whether it's positive or critical, whether you're a teacher or a student or have students, whether you have a classroom or you're just personally interested. I'd love to share it with you and get your feedback. So at the end of this, I will share those links with anybody that's interested. So yeah, we could go ahead and jump into some questions. Thanks, Hope.
No problem. I actually, there's a lot of really great comments here, but somebody said, I sometimes hear people say that math, unlike, let's say, humanities, is accretive. Each concept leads to the next. So if a student misses a concept, it becomes very hard to continue. A gap arises. They fall behind, lose confidence. I'm wondering if you could talk about this special case of math.
Yeah, this happens a lot. And one of the things that I saw was I worked at a school that was K through 8 for about 15 years. And I would get to know the students as they came up, and I knew the teacher that came before me. And so in younger grades, there's a lot of opportunity to do hands-on learning, right? There's a lot of manipulatives, whether it's Montessori style or whatever, the classroom is, even if it's just like, hey, I have 2 blocks and 1 + 1 = 2. But the farther you go into your math education, not only are things building on each other in terms of concepts, it starts to become more and more abstract, and you have less and less manipulatives to work with. By the time you get to middle school, there's almost no hands-on learning. And so if that becomes challenging on multiple levels, because again, if you're not the student that learns from the logical linguistic learning style, if that's not your primary way to learn, you're going to miss things. And then it becomes increasingly more difficult as you go to the next class because there were some concepts that you missed. So this is a I think a huge opportunity to create and to share with students and teachers at this level that would help them immensely on that journey. Because again, I've had firsthand experience of it where students came in, and once they started to build things and measure things and draw, they got it for the first time, and they started to not only be successful in math, but actually love math. So I completely agree that that's a huge issue.
Thank you. This next question, I thought maybe Jordan, you could share it. It was about the connection between fractal patterns in advanced math and spirituality. And yeah, go ahead, Jordan, if you want to just say it.
Yeah, sure, I can read it. What is the connection between fractal patterns in advanced math and spirituality, as in fractal patterns revealing themselves in deep states of meditation or in during psychedelic experiences? Can math explain the nature of the universe and consciousness?
Man, I'd love to make a few pots of tea and sit down and drop into that question for a long time.
I knew you'd say that. That's why I think maybe you two need to set up a Zoom call and dive deep into that one. I love it.
Yeah, speaking my language. So fractals is one of the things that I had the opportunity to study in high school at Governor School, and it really opened up my mind and consciousness to a whole nother level. And that's as deep as you want to go with it. It's literally infinite, as you probably know, bringing up that question. So yes, once I love to introduce fractals in my classes, and that will definitely be part of what we do in this course. There are fractals related to pi for sure that are absolutely beautiful and profound. And it's a wonderful thing to explore artistically. It's a wonderful thing to explore philosophically and conceptually. One of the coolest math classes I had, we actually played an animation of a fractal where you're just zooming in for minutes on end and seeing, the self-similar patterns that are, unique, but coming back to the same pattern that repeats itself over and over. And we had this beautiful discussion with the 7th graders about what it brought up for them. And it was profound. So again, we will have to dive in on a deeper level sometime to explore the deeper aspects of that. But
Round
absolutely,
two.
I believe that that's, part of the blueprint and framework of nature. Absolutely.
That's a beautiful question. I thought I would put the spotlight on Jesse and or Claire. I know you're both working and Steve, in education settings, coordinating with educators, coordinating with learners. And I wanted to hear if any of you feel called to share what comes up for you when you hear Mark talking about his work and his approach to math in relation to the work you're doing with kids and learners.
Yeah, I can jump in here. There's been something kind of just bopping around in my head a fair amount, and it's kind of related to two things. One is I was just thinking about the focus on kind of the Industrial Revolution and looking at basically like 1900 to 1999 being still this like very deep focus on having kids in schools kind of like factories, like moving from the agricultural. And if we go back to what Mark was saying, like, if you're working in the agricultural sector, you're out in nature you're out kind of, even if you're not explicitly learning math, you're out with the math. Like what you're doing in terms of, if you are constructing a fence for the farm, you are doing math. You are seeing the math in the nature. You are doing rows and measuring, and all of that is very math based. But then when we look at, the schooling with the Industrial Revolution, really looking at the whole 20th century, is very much like in the classroom, preparing kids for factory work, needing to go through these mathematical concepts, but very much just like looking at worksheets, essentially, like in so many different ways. And so the more I come back to doing projects, like I do a lot of kind of like simple carpentry construction projects with my kids. And so like we were building a bunk bed for my daughter, and they get involved, and it's very much math. It's like, okay, you need to measure, and they're young, they're, first grade, third grade, and sixth grade. And so it's, oh, okay, well, what is 5 1/4 inches? Oh, now we have to wait. So we have to measure, we have to get this board to fit here. And so if we're measuring this thing, what do we have to subtract to get this board? Then we're going to mark here, wait a second, how big is the blade? If we're cutting the blade and we have to get this exact, do we have to subtract a 1/16 of an inch off that again? What is a 1/16 off of an eighth? Like, and these are young, but they're, and then, oh geez, we have to angle this board. How are we going to figure out what angle to fit into that joint to angle it? So, soon as you get into this kind of building stuff with your hands, math is everywhere. And so I just think that as soon as you can kind of get out of the classroom into whether it's nature, and I love this thing of like looking at, even if you're hanging pictures in your house, what is the golden rule of hanging pictures? You don't want them to be exactly halfway on the wall. You want to use the 2/3, 1/3 rule, like that golden rule ratio. And why is that? Like, it's math again, it comes in over and over again. And you're like, oh, we're just hanging pictures. Well, I learned that at one point, and I was like, okay, when I hang pictures around the house, I got to use the golden rule, like, so these are cool things that I feel like we can just kind of explode into this world. And my fear, just a little bit of fear with so much computer-based work, is we go from like the classroom where you're all in the classroom to then we're all in the screen. And so like what Mark's saying is like, to pull the kids out of the screen, like the screen is, I mean, I do a lot of education on screens, but to bring it back out and have like, I don't know, just thinking outside the box, having like cameras in the house if you're doing homeschooling, and be like, okay, now let's like do this, like let's do cooking projects, let's use math with cooking projects, all these different things to kind of like get the kids learning. And this is how I think they really remember, and they get how it works in life. So sorry, I've been monologuing a little bit, but I'll leave it there.
I love the passion.
Well, I mean,
parenting. It's great.
Yeah, and everything you're saying is so resonant. My daughter, we did some homeschooling for a couple of years, and one of the projects that we did was we built a greenhouse, and we built a geodesic dome greenhouse. And so exactly what you're saying, all the math related to carpentry skills is useful, it's practical, and it's really fun, and it's empowering when kids get to apply that and then also get to build another skill at the same time. So again, integrating all of these things creates integrity. So yes, thanks for sharing, Jesse.
Anyone else? Claire, did you want to share anything?
Yeah, so at School of Humanity, our learners learn through tackling challenges, and the challenges generally, that is like an overarching challenge, and then they'll look at that in an interdisciplinary way. And so we always integrate maths concepts into the challenge. Just to give an example, last term one of the challenges was designing space habitats, So there they were looking at, geometry again, like how to, Pythagoras' theorem and things like that. But we've had 1 year now. We've just started the second year of the school, and one of our kind of key learnings from our first year was that the learners do need to have a foundation in maths. So it's not always enough to do it in the interdisciplinary aspect and expect them to just be able to handle it. So we've actually set up a new program this year, which is called Quant Lab, so that they're just kind of getting some of those key basics, foundational knowledge in maths, so that they can then go on and apply it in an interdisciplinary way. And so they're using that knowledge and applying it to real life kind of situations and challenges. But it was a good learning curve for the school to kind of explore that and kind of come to the realization that there was learners needing more than just doing it in the interdisciplinary context. Yeah.
It's interesting because one of the conversations that we were having before this call even started was related to basic math skills, things like times tables and things like that. And even coming back to that, it's like, how do you turn that into a game? Because that helps kids want to practice. And so I've created, a whole range of games, dice games and things like that, where kids can play and learn at the same time, because those skills are important to learn. And a lot of times they do need to be, they've been missed along the way. And maybe they just come into your class in like 6th or 7th grade and there are some holes. But what are some ways, whether it's flashcards or dice or things like that, that you can play with this and learn it to get up to speed on those basic skills? That's also another important thing. So thanks for sharing that.
Steve, go ahead. Oh, you're just on mute. You're on mute.
I want to follow up on what Claire observed. I think you need both. I think you need these. I'm going to use the analogy of music. Being a lifelong musician, there is nothing like a musical experience to experience teamwork and working on something very tangible and real, your musical product. But I've also found, I don't think this is mutually exclusive, that if you gather a group of musicians who have the skills, the product can go further places. So I think I'm relating back to what Claire said, and I think the words I would use are, I think in the early going, learning math in these multiple modalities can make the difference between whether somebody loves it or hates it. And I think that's really important. And I think down the road, as you're preparing for more advanced math, I think you need both things like the times tables and the real, I want to call it the vocabulary and the syntax, and the real world application where you can apply it. And I think if you can weave together both, then you've got real music.
Absolutely.
I think I just revealed my primary learning style without intending to.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I just had a conversation with Roy, the gentleman who wrote the music that I was just talking about, and we were talking about at what point did he start to understand the deeper connections between music and mathematics. And he was talking about how when he was in school, the way that he learned math was through equations. And at that point, it was kind of like just being given sheet music. And so if you didn't know how to read sheet music yet, but you were given sheet music and you were starting to learn music theory just from looking at the sheet music, and you never got to actually hear the song, it would be a radically different experience, right? And for a lot of kids, I think that the way that they're learning math is like being given sheet music and learning music theory and not being given the experience of hearing the song and playing with it. And so both are important. I agree with you 100%, because if you just listen to music, but you don't have an experience of how to look at, a score, a Mozart score, and be able to, either read that or to be able to write your own music, it's a different level of experience. Ideally, you'd be able to do both. And so there's definitely an opportunity to do that in mathematics. And I think that, learning the equations and learning the algorithms and learning the basic structure of arithmetic is a framework that's important, as well as the, analogy or metaphor of hearing the music is maybe like understanding how these patterns show up in nature and in our own body and in art and architecture. And so putting both of those together is really powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Mark, can I ask you a question related to this? In that, one of the other missing gaps in my early math education was just this. So there's an equation, but there's a structure to equations. Just as, by the way, I'm a historian, so I know how to write an essay. I know how to write a book, because there are structural issues. But no one taught me, not a single person ever. I've never. This is how an equation is structured, so that if you add this component to an equation, you're moving the curve to the left or the right or up and down, or you're deepening the angle. Do you see what I mean? This is assumed. And so it'd be the same if you're learning how to read music and you don't actually know what a short note and a long note means. It's irrelevant. And I think that it would be because equations are so used in mathematics, having a base, do you intend to actually have a basic module, which is, this is the notation of math and this is how it's all put together?
It's a great question. This is definitely the first offering in a whole series that we would love to create. My vision for the next few years is to, find partners that want to help us develop a whole encyclopedia of these sorts of offerings that could be modules that, whether it's a teacher in a classroom or a homeschool parent or a student of any age, be it, young or adult, can mix and match these. And there's so many different topics that we would love to explore. Music and math, music or math and astronomy, fractals, the golden ratio. One of the ones that we were just looking at recently was an elementary level sort of Montessori approach to this as well, that again teaches all of these basics. So the answer is yes. And
Just the beginning.
this is the first of many. So
I
yeah,
want
it's
to
great.
thank you, Mark, so much. And I know we're getting to the top of our 90 minutes, and I will be sharing the videos that we couldn't watch properly today, but thanks for your patience. And I also want to say that it's been so great. I don't know if she might have popped off, but we watched Breeza go all the way home on the train and watch the darkness and her through nature to her home in Slovenia. So I just want to give a shout out to the truly global and multi-generations joining us here today. And also the Circle of Connections. Thank you, Phil Moore, for introducing me to Mark and everyone else to Mark. I always love to hear your connections and who's inspiring you, why they're inspiring you, and why more people need to meet them. So I really appreciate you showing up, and I'm going to be popping the recording up. Please share it with people you feel need to meet Mark and his approach, and we will be in touch. Thank you, everyone. Good night, Breeza. Have a good sleep.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
Look forward to being in touch, and yeah, blessings.
Thank you.